I'm here. How are you?
Hey, bro, he had done.
All right. Good morning.
Good morning.
It's so very good to see you. My son's walking with a lot of water in his hands. I don't know why he's doing that. That's what I'm saying. He's going to hydroplane.
Maybe they're studying in New York.
Oh, maybe. I don't know what that's about. Well, anyway, go ahead, if you will, and turn to John chapter 21, last chapter in the Gospel of John. And we'll see how far we get. Hopefully, we'll finish today. But if not, then we'll finish next week. But after this, we're going to start studying the topic of how to study the Bible. And so hope that will bless you in some form or fashion. We will see. But anyway, let's go ahead and jump right on in to the Gospel of John, John 21. And so far in John 21, verses 1 to 13, we see Jesus making another resurrection appearance before on the seashore of the Sea of Galilee. He sees some of the apostles out fishing. Peter jumps in, swims to him, and verse 7, and then the other apostles or other disciples came in the little boat, for they were not far from the land, about 200 cubits. That's about 100 yards or so, dragging the net with fish. And then as soon as they come to land, they saw a fire of coals there and fish laid on it and bread. And so that, to me, would be Jesus is now going to make the fire for them to cook their food. And so Jesus said to them, "Bring some of the fish which you have caught." Simon Peter went up and dragged the net to land. So he's already there. He swam over when he figured out it was Jesus. And verse 7 is the Lord. And then Peter went off after John saw who it was. And so now Peter's on the boat. I'll get my geography in a minute. Now Peter's on the land, pulling the boat in along with a net that did not break. And verse 12, Jesus said to them, "Come and eat breakfast." Yet none of the disciples dared ask him, "Who are you?" because they knew, or knowing, that it was the Lord. And so Jesus then came and took the bread and gave it to them, and likewise a fish. This is now the third time Jesus showed himself to his disciples after he was raised from the dead. Few things, just bring up some extra points here. The last time that Jesus had bread and fish, how did that happen? You remember? In John 6, what happened? Feeding the 5,000. Okay. And do you remember how he got that bread and that fish when he fed the 5,000? From a boy's lunch. All right. He questioned the disciples. How much money will it take to feed all these people? Andrew gave an answer. He said it probably will take this amount of money. And then Jesus said, in essence, have you not considered the other additional factor here, which is Christ is here with you. Bring me the lad. Bring me this boy over here. Here he comes. The boy gave him his fish and his bread, and then we know that's when he fed the 5,000 after that. And so in John 21, what's happening? Now he's going to feed the disciples. Now, prior in John 6, the waiters were the disciples. And now Jesus is going to be serving them instead. Very important, because with Jesus serving in his resurrection state, okay, he has yet to ascend back to the Father. That's going to come in a few more days after this. That according to Luke 24 and Acts 1, that what do you think will be the importance here of Jesus feeding them? Is there any importance? What do you think that message is that he's trying to get across to them? What do you think? Yeah. To Peter. Well, I think it was too. Yeah, but he's ready for Peter. And we'll get there in a moment. I feel like John 21 is a really good conclusion chapter of John because you kind of see a lot of different elements that have already been brought up. He's now going to just kind of keep on explaining everything away. And so I think right here, if you were to jump around a little bit in John 13, what does Jesus say about serving? He says, unless I can wash you, unless Christ, he says to Peter in this case, can wash your whole body, you have none of me. And that's the idea of serving, where Christ was washing the disciples' feet. He was serving them in a very manual labor type of way. And I think right here, he's still showing them that in spite of him being the Lord of glory, 1 Corinthians 2, verse number 8, he's still going to really elaborate, show, demonstrate that even though your Lord was just crucified and was resurrected, he still is going to serve you. I think it's a very important thing because sometimes, depending on who you look at for different things, that when you look at just people being people, and when you have achieved certain levels of accomplishment, it's a lot easier to not continue serving somebody else because now you, in your career or in your mentality or in your paycheck or whatever it may be to differentiate you between somebody else, now that's above you. Okay, for an example, there are very few people inside of companies that we'll say it's a CEO of a major company. Pick Walmart. Okay, the Walton family. Let's say the Walton family, the ones that set up Walmart in Arkansas, how many times would you think that these guys are going to go around and clean the toilets of the office? No, they pay someone else to do that. Now, here's a fun question. Do you think that Jesus would have cleaned the toilets? I think he would have. Isn't that interesting? Even though Jesus, being glorious, being God himself incarnate, John 1:14, he's still saying, I'm even going to serve my subordinates breakfast. I'm still going to cook the food for them. I'm going to serve them even after I've achieved all these great things of who I am. And so I think this verse right here is dealing with him being of service to others. Which I think is a very important thing, that even though he has achieved this because of who he is and what he's done, he still has not forgot who he is and what he is to mankind. Okay? And so then, verse 15. So when they had eaten breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me more than these? And he said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And so he said to him, feed my lambs. And he said to him again a second time, Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me? And he said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And he said to him, tend my sheep. And he said to him the third time, Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me? Peter was grieved. The word grieved there is a very strong word. Peter would seem to be getting kind of annoyed about this thing. He's very troubled in his spirit. That's the idea of grieved. Because he said to him the third time, do you love me? And so Peter said to him, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. And so Jesus said to him, feed my sheep. Verse 18, most assuredly, I say to you, when you were younger, you girded yourself and walked where you wished. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and another will gird and carry you where you do not wish. This he spoke, signifying by what death he would glorify God. And then he spoke in this and said to him, follow me. Okay, now, what is happening there in John 21, 15 to 17 in particular. What's happening? How many times did Jesus ask him, do you love me? 3 times. Okay? Now, normally we would associate that, and I think rightly so, with what did Peter do 3 times to Jesus? Denied him. Okay? He denied that he knew Jesus. He denied that he was with Jesus. He denied that he was with the group of apostles. He said, I'm not with anybody here. I'm just, why are you even here in the morning? I don't know, but he didn't think about that, I guess. But, he's very, he thought he was in Egypt. He thought he was in denial. And so Peter's trying to, and it's very interesting that he's getting annoyed with Jesus, but just imagine how Christ would have felt with him. Even though Christ told him, Matthew 26, you're going to do this. And then here he goes. Christ obviously would have been very, as we see here, he is forgiving. Even at the cross, he was forgiving of others. And Peter, though, and you see the different tenses here. The very first thing that Jesus says to Peter in verse 15 is, feed my lambs. Now, this section right here has been abused to elevate, there we go, Peter to when he became the first pope. Okay? And this is when the certain groups, particularly the Catholics, will say that Peter right here is when Christ really told him you're going to be the Pope. Number one thing, do you see anything about an additional office mentioned here? No. Number two thing is, when you look at this, does this then tell us that the other 11 apostles are not going to do this? No. But I think the particular emphasis here is he's trying to make Peter understand, I forgive you. Now, with this forgiveness, has Jesus made this forgiveness conditional? Okay? When he says, feed my sheep, tend my lambs, keep my sheep, do you think that was conditional? That, do you love me? He says, yes. And he says, because of that, keep my sheep, keep my lambs, whatever. Was this forgiveness a conditional forgiveness? So if Peter had said no, would Christ have forgiven Peter? Sure he would. All right. Very good. So when we, let me get my notes out here. So now when you look at what's happening here, you have the asking or the affection of Jesus, verses 15 and 19. 15 and 17 deals with the asking mentioned there, how Peter denied him. John 18, 17, 25, and 27. And you have the acceptance. And so therefore Christ commanded Peter to follow after me. John 21, verse number 19. When you look at verses 15 to 17, obviously we've already discussed about Peter denying, but this is all dealing with the restoration of Peter. And the word love there, do you love me, or lovest thou me? Love there is the Greek verb agape or agapeo, a term indicating strong devotion of a high order. But when Peter replied with the words, yes, Lord, you know that I love thee, the disciple used the verb phileo, a word denoting the humbler, warmer emotion growing out of kinship or close association. So you see a different word association there. The former word, agape, when Christ says, do you love me, clearly suggests a higher order of reverence and respect. It can be exercised by the will of another. It is subject to command, and a choice may be made whether it will be indulged in or not. The very words, feed my sheep, or feed my lambs, rather, I believe goes right into how Peter was recognized that he should become, as 1 Peter 5, verse 4 would say, he is to become a shepherd. And that's another terminology we use associated with being an elder. Okay? In 1 Peter 5, this is how we also know that Peter did not take on any kind of pope role, because in 1 Peter 5, verses 1 to 4, Peter calls himself a fellow elder, which would obviously associate itself with him being with other men who are also elders. He's not some kind of a special case. He's above the other elders. They're all collectively, they're all authoritative and all the same. Okay? And so, right there, then, the idea of being an elder, as we have in this congregation, thankfully, is one of the words we use sometimes is being a shepherd. Now, I know Brother Curtis understands what being a shepherd, from being from Carthage, Texas. Shepherding all those trees around. But, when you think about the idea of being a shepherd, though, and then you think about Psalm 23 with Jesus, and John 10 about how Christ is the chief shepherd. He's the good shepherd. The sheep hear my voice and they follow me. He's saying, Peter, as well as the other apostles, in this case, you're going to keep on with that role, if you will. You're going to keep on leading the church. And that was all to be intended. And so that's why when you read verses like Ephesians 2, verse 19 to 21, when it says that the church's foundation is on the prophets and the apostles, with Christ being the chief cornerstone. Okay, they're all connected. And then obviously we see that the test of the apostles came in right at the very beginning in the book of Acts, where they were in prison several times. And then Acts 5, I think, is when their apostolic authority was really called into question. And then that's when, because of someone lying to them about money being given or not given or withheld or whatever, that then they lied. And this would be Ananias and Sapphira, and they lied to Peter and to James and to John. And then what happened? Well, it says that the Spirit got involved then, and those two people didn't make it out alive. And so it says then that some other disciples came and carried the bodies away. But that was all a complete test or check, if you will, to really show that the apostles have great authority. Okay? And so right here, he's just elaborating for Peter that you have a great responsibility and obligation as an apostle. And obviously we know from John 14 and John 15 how the Comforter will come and he will bring you to remembrance all things I have said. That's going to come in the book of Acts. And so they're not going to be by themselves. They're going to have the Spirit's help along the way, as was intended. But right here, he's trying to restore Peter back to that right fellowship with Jesus. Very, very important. Okay? So Peter's leadership needed to be reinforced publicly among the other disciples because they all knew about Peter's denial. Now, let's see. Peter's future is found in verses 18 and 19. Now, this one is interesting. So, when you read verse 18, now it says, "When you're old, you will stretch out your hands, and another will gird you and carry you where you do not wish." Now, what do you think that's talking about? Does anyone know the history of Peter after Acts has ended? What happened to Peter? Do y'all know?
I've heard that he was, I think it was Peter who was later crucified. And it was that he was asked to be crucified upside down because he didn't deserve to be crucified like his Lord. I hope
That's the one. That's the one.
Who was doing that?
And that's around AD 64. And so right now it's around AD 33 or so. So that's 31 years later. So this man might have been, we don't know how old Peter was when he initially began to follow Jesus. But we'll just say he may have been in his 60s or maybe even in his 70s when all that was transpiring. Okay? He wasn't just down the road or keep on reading, here he is. It's a long time difference. And that was also the same time when Paul was taken. And also the same thing happened to Paul. He was crucified. But that was all a sign of Roman authority trying to smash Christianity in its infancy. But Peter was indeed the one. So because of this whole idea that he was an older man, he's already been through a lot of his own persecutions and everything. We know he's been in prison several times. And now in John 21, verse number 19, it says, and somebody else is going to gird you and carry you where you do not wish. And so Peter will go on to say in 2 Peter 1, verse 4, he is about to put off his tent. And then also in verse 22, he would also be right along there with the other apostles and following after Jesus. But then you see a transition between Peter's future and then you will see John, verse 20. And so then Peter, turning around, saw the disciple whom Jesus loved following, who also had leaned on his breast at the supper, and said, Lord, who is the one who betrays you? That's what the remembrance is there. Okay. Peter, seeing him, said to Jesus, but Lord, what about this man? And so Jesus said to him, if I will that he remain till I come, what is that to you? You follow after me. And then this saying went out among the brethren that this disciple would not die. Yet Jesus did not say to him that he would not die, but if I will that he remain till I come, what is that to you? Now, what is going on right there, do you think? So who's the one? Now we know that this one is going to be John, the one who's going to write the book, 24 and 25 of this section here. But what's Peter doing here toward John? What's he doing? Christ told him, feed my sheep, tend my lambs, keep my sheep. You're going to die by somebody else's will. You don't wish to go there, but you're going to have to go anyways. Turns over and sees this other man. He asks him, what about him? Was he right or wrong for doing that? According to the verses.
Wasn't he just a little bit concerned that John was his favorite?
I don't know the answer to that one. I don't know. What do you think?
I've always kind of thought that. I don't know if it's right or wrong.
Yeah. I just don't know how I would answer that one. Because now we know from other instances with John and James, they tried to usurp authority, in a sense, over the apostles and try to be great. But obviously, it was John and the resurrection there who obviously saw the tomb. He believed 1 John 20, verse number 8. He's the one that was all the way with Jesus from, he's one of the first apostles, along with Peter and Andrew. But I don't know if I would say that Peter knew he was a favorite. I don't know. I need to think about that one a little bit more. I think he just saw him. He just asked about him. I don't know if it was I don't know the answer to that one. That's a good question. All right. All right. So, was Peter, though, right or wrong when he said that? What about this man?
Know if he was right or wrong, but Father Jesus told him, don't you worry about it. And said, you follow me. He said, I'm talking to you, and this is for you. And he's worried about John. And he said, you follow me. That's all I can see.
Yes. Yeah. Joseph.
That whole chapter, especially when you start talking to Peter, like he was defining their ministry, feed my sheep, telling them that's what your ministry is from now on. Yes.
And that's what it was, right? From the book of Acts on, you read about that very, very much so. You have anything? What you got?
Well, Jesus plainly tells him, it's my will what happens.
Right. Twice it says that.
It's not yours to know.
Right.
In other words, Chris said, mind your own business.
Pretty much.
And Hank Williams had a song that said, mind your own business.
Yeah.
Because if you mind your business, you won't be minded mine.
That's pretty good. I didn't go there. That's good. What you got, Felicia?
I was going to say something similar to that because it reminds me a lot when I'm dealing with my own children and I'm talking specifically to Lake or whatever the storm, and one of them some way about what we're talking about. Well, what about Lake? Or what about storm? And I have to say, hey, this is about what's going on with you, or we're having this conversation. Let's worry about you, and we'll take the storm. We'll worry about the storm.
Yes.
The whole time I was reading that, I was thinking in my head how this happens to my own children. They act very similar.
And this is a grown man too. Yeah.
Well, not the blame this year, but put it on someone else.
Yes.
Take the focus off of me. What about him? And Jesus is like, no, we need to. This is about you. We're talking about you and what's going to happen in your future. I will discuss with John what's going to happen with John when I get you.
Yes. Right. I'm gonna get Crystal. I'll get you. Okay. I know you have your hand up. Okay. What you got? I'll get you. Go ahead.
Also shows that they were just like one of us. It showed that their disciple, they were walking hand in hand with Jesus, but at the same time, they still were human. So they had a certain training for characteristics that some of us have today, where even if we need to focus on certain things, we kind of sort of like deviate, and we gotta kind of like stick to the script and stick to what it is. Another thing is Jesus was, is their Lord. So they're trying to find out, okay, well, you're back, what you want me to do next? Kind of thing. Well, I should do something to, defend your honor or defend you. And he's just giving them the reassurance, like, I understand how you may feel, but you need to kind of just stay focused on what I'm telling you, which is, feed my lamb, feed my sheep. This is your job. This is what you need to focus on, and that's really about it. So it's kind of like taking your own personal feelings or thoughts out of it and just sticking to the script.
Right.
Psalm 103 says, know ye the Lord, he is God. It is he that hath made us, and we are not of ourselves. We are his people and the sheep of his pasture.
That's good. Yeah, that's good.
So there's an old gospel song called Life's Railway, Railroad of Life. it says the engineer has to keep him trained,
Mhm.
to keep his eyes focused on the rail. If he looks anywhere else, he's got a whole training behind him to go forward.
Right. Right. All right. What you got?
Another thing, when you're reading verse 20, I always thought, like, why would the Catholics skip verse 20 shortly after, what we were saying about verse 15 and not try to focus on making the Pope the disciple whom Jesus loved? I mean, in my mind, I would feel like that was, if there was any hierarchy here in the Bible, it would have been there. And so it seemed like if I was going to put someone as a Pope or, in that position above everyone else, wouldn't it be the one that Jesus loved most, or who was mentioned? That was just
Yeah.
it just seemed to me how that scripture was for one used, but just further down was another one where it seemed like there was a one he had loved.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. This one, and so with the Catholics, the normal jump that will happen is they'll say Matthew 16 to 18, where in verse 17, after Jesus, Peter said about Christ, thou art the Christ, Son of the living God. And then the blessing was on Peter. Blessed art thou, Simon, Peter, Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood hath not revealed this unto you, but my Father who's in heaven. And therefore, he says, verse 18, I will build, upon this rock, I'll build my church. And so, right there, they'll say, well, look, right there, the rock there is Peter because his name is Cephas, and that means stone, and then rock is Petra, or Petros rather, and then they'll jump from there to John 21, and they say, see, he told you what happened now after the resurrection. Now there's force behind these words. Here he is. Then you see in Acts 2. Now he's the one that's mentioned as the preeminent one. But in Acts 2, Peter was not by himself preaching. The other 11 were also out there preaching too. But the book of Acts, between Acts chapters 1 and 13, really center on Peter. And then Acts 14 through the end of the book centers on Paul. And then also, then you have the epistles come in, and then so you see the flow with how your Bible's put together here. Yeah, it is interesting. It is interesting. I don't know. I've got I won't say it's a friend. I have an acquaintance. Me and him were roommates in college, and he very strong. He went Catholic, and I have not talked to him very much about it at all. I think he's just far out. But that's what he also will say, is that John 16:18 goes right to John 21, and that's when, I don't know. That's just, so I thought, while we're here, I want to mention it. But yeah, it is interesting about, that is an interesting observation. That's good. That's good. All right. Now, but what do you see about Saul? I think we've already hit that one pretty well. What was the outcome of John's life?
He's the only apostle that died of natural death.
Yeah. Yeah. Around 80, 90, 100 type. Usually the time frame given for that. He was exiled. He was in Ephesus, exiled from there over to Patmos, and then that's where he had the revelation of John, which is written in your Bible. Yeah, and the other 11, if you were to do, and it's all based on tradition and documentation, it's all it is. But the other 11 really went pretty well scattered around. I mean, they didn't stay just in Jerusalem and Palestine. They really, I think like Matthew went to India. I think it's been said that Thomas went to Spain. There's some talk that another apostle may have gone into the Gauls, and that's Germany. I mean, they really went around. You have a few that went down in Africa. I want to say that was like It's all about memory, so I'm probably off by a few of them. But I know that a few went to Africa, and incidentally, I don't know if this is, well, it's not, but it'll be interesting to find out the answer one day. How the church in Ethiopia, now I think this is dealing with Acts 8 myself, but it is interesting there that the church in Ethiopia is one of the oldest churches in all the world. And there's still, even today, a stream of the church in Ethiopia. I think that's from Acts 8, but there is also discussing traditions and stuff that say some of the apostles may have gone to Ethiopia as well. And then it's possible he could have touched on them.
Ethiopian eunuch,
That's right. That's Acts 8.
what happened to him after he was baptized.
That's correct. That's correct. And that's what I'm saying. So like there is talk that there may have been an apostle who may have gone through Ethiopia as well, and he's attached himself to the church. We don't know, but that's all, again, tradition stuff. So we don't have that written. But then also he was there. So either way, the church we know for a fact is in Ethiopia because of Acts 8 for sure. But anyway, go ahead.
Back in 15, when Jesus asked Peter to love about me,
Mm-hmm.
I was just curious. He used the word, he said agape.
Jesus used agape, and then Peter used phileo.
Peter used brotherly love.
Yeah.
Jesus used the love that from God places. Right? Agape love.
Yes. So Peter used, Christ used what I call sacrificial love.
The second time, he said the same thing again, right?
Yes.
He
Yeah.
responded the same. The third time, if you look at the third time, Jesus used the same word that Peter used, brotherly love.
Yeah.
I wonder why he changed. It's just something to look at.
That's a great question. I don't know. There is a string of thought that's beginning to establish the brotherhood. That's generally what you might see right there. And then the brotherhood comes out in Acts 2 as a church. But as the full-fledged church, now as we call the brotherhood. But that has also been thrown around in there a little bit. Good question. All right. So John, only one who to have died of natural causes. The three areas of interest, I'll just repeat. He's telling Christ telling Peter when he's asking about John to look at your own role, focus your attention, will, energy, and efforts upon your own responsibilities, and realize that God knows where you can best serve and that he will put you where he needs you. Verse 23, the note the if I will, a majestic declaration was that this Christ is now the disposer of men's lives. He did not say if God or if the Father wills, but if I will. So he changed. I thought that was interesting. Verse 24 comes in. Now it says the end of the book. I'm going to try to finish. I got 4 minutes. I think we can do it. Notice this. Says, this is the disciple who testifies of these things and wrote these things, and we know that his testimony is true. And there are also many other things which Jesus did, which if they were written one by one, I suppose that even the world itself could not contain the books that would be written. And he uses the word amen. Regarding the comments on write, the Greek word graphion, which means to cause to write, may imply that he had a scribe. Okay. John 21, verse 24 means that the beloved disciple composed the gospel, whether or not he wielded the pen. He could have received assistance, various kinds in the process of composition of the work, or it could have been edited somebody else. But the same either way requires that he was responsible both for the content and for the words of the book. Who are the we there? Now notice how it says we. Verse 24, we know his testimony is true. Few different ways to look at the word we. Readers along with John could be one option. A circle of teachers or elders who have identified and recommended the gospel to others. Number 3, circle of eyewitnesses, which includes John himself. And sometimes we see that John has used the word we, meaning I. You ever use that yourself? You know, we want to go to Chick-fil-A, and it just means you. You know, so I think that's the one personally. He's used it also in 3 John 9, verse 9 through 12. Very similar thing where he's changed the pronouns we and I. Kind of like they say this, but actually it's you saying it. And then you're the they that no one knows about. Okay, I think it's that kind of a thing going on there. 25. Interesting idea here is in John 1, verses 1 to 18, there are 496 syllables. I didn't count those, by the way. But while in John 21, there are 496 words, thus showing the conclusion. John 1:18 is dealing with what you call the prologue, beginning, the preamble, however you want to phrase that. And then the chapter, John 21, is the conclusion of John, so they use very similar rhetoric, literacy devices. And so John, the apostle, John the Baptist, bore witness of Jesus, in John 1, 7 through 8. And now John the apostle is bearing witness of him at the end. And so you have the differences of the Johns there. Okay. And so that will be John the apostle. Okay, not John the Baptist. Okay, different. Very different. Okay, that's all I've got. I'm going to stop. I'm at the end of John. How about that? So next week, we're going to start on the class about how to study the Bible. And I think it's going to be a really good one. And so I hope that you'll be here back for that. So we will conclude class, and thank you for being here this morning. Appreciate y'all very much. And we'll have worship here in a few minutes.